The stage is set for a showdown that could reshape the future of Europe, Ukraine, and global security. In a stunning turn of events, European leaders are openly challenging Donald Trump's controversial approach to the Ukraine war, accusing him of sidelining allies and playing into Vladimir Putin's hands.
Because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again.
But Trump has other plans. His decision to exclude Ukraine from initial peace talks and his skepticism about NATO membership have sent shockwaves through Europe. Critics are calling it a betrayal of Western unity, while Trump insists he's the only one who can bring peace.
It looks like that would just be a meeting between you and Putin and perhaps the Crown Prince, but not President Zelensky.
Probably we'll have a first meeting, and then we'll see what we can do about the second meeting.
The stakes couldn't be higher. European leaders, led by the UK's Keir Starmer and France's Emmanuel Macron, are scrambling to counter Trump's moves, warning that his actions could embolden Putin and leave Ukraine vulnerable to future attacks. So, is Trump's strategy a bold move for peace, or a dangerous gamble that could fracture the West? Stay with us as we uncover the explosive details of this high-stakes political drama, the growing rift between Europe and the US, and the shocking implications for Ukraine's future. Europe's growing rift with Trump. Donald Trump's approach to the Ukraine war has sparked outrage across Europe. His decision to exclude Ukraine from the first round of peace talks with Vladimir Putin has been labeled by critics as a dangerous betrayal of Western unity. European leaders, who have stood firmly behind Ukraine's sovereignty, are now questioning whether Trump's strategy is a calculated risk or a reckless concession to Russia.
Only a lasting peace in Ukraine that safeguards its sovereignty will deter Putin from further aggression in the future.
The frustration is evident. Leaders like Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron warn that Trump's actions could embolden Putin to push for even more territorial gains. Starmer in particular has been vocal about the need for Europe to step up its defense efforts, while also emphasizing the critical role of US backing in ensuring peace.
It's clear the US is not going to leave NATO, but we Europeans will have to do more. The issue of burden sharing is not new, but it is now pressing, and Europeans will have to step up, both in terms of spending and the capabilities that we provide.
Trump's skepticism about Ukraine's NATO membership and his suggestion that Ukraine may never regain its pre-2014 borders have sent shockwaves through Europe. Many see this as a signal that Trump is willing to concede to Russian demands, a move that could have devastating consequences for Ukraine and the broader European security landscape.
Sir, just to be clear, do you see any future in which Ukraine returns to its pre-2014 borders?
Well, I think Pete said today that that's unlikely, right? It certainly would seem to be unlikely. They took a lot of land, and they fought for that land, and they lost a lot of soldiers.
The divide between Trump and his European counterparts is growing deeper by the day. While Trump insists his strategy is the fastest path to peace, European leaders argue that it risks legitimizing Putin's aggression and leaving Ukraine vulnerable to future attacks. As tensions rise, the question remains: is Trump's approach a bold move to end the war, or a reckless gamble that could fracture the West and leave Europe to pick up the pieces? Quick favor before we continue. If you're enjoying the content, consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Over 98% of you watch without subscribing, and hitting that button really helps us out. It's free, easy, and keeps you in the loop for more great videos. Thanks a ton. Now, back to it. Trump's gamble, a path to peace or a gift to Putin? Donald Trump's strategy for ending the Ukraine war is as controversial as it is unconventional, by proposing to meet Vladimir Putin in Saudi Arabia without Ukraine at the table. Trump has sparked outrage among European leaders and raised serious questions about his commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty. Critics argue that sidelining Ukraine in the early stages of peace talks is not just a diplomatic misstep, it's a dangerous signal to Putin that the West is divided. This approach has left many wondering, how can peace be achieved if Ukraine, the nation most affected by the war, is excluded from the process? European leaders like Keir Starmer have been quick to point out the risks of such a move. Starmer has warned that any peace agreement without Ukraine's full participation would lack legitimacy and could embolden Russia to continue its aggression.
Starting talks with Russia, has the United States undermined the UK, Europe, and Ukraine?
What the United States wants is lasting peace. That's what Ukraine wants. That's what the United Kingdom wants. And that's what European allies want. What is important is that we ensure that Ukraine is in the strongest possible position.
Trump's critics argue that his strategy is less about achieving peace and more about appeasing Putin. His recent comments about Ukraine's NATO membership and territorial integrity have only added fuel to the fire. By calling Ukraine's NATO membership impractical and suggesting that Ukraine may never regain all its pre-2014 borders, Trump appears to be aligning with key Russian demands.
NATO membership for Ukraine?
I don't think it's practical to have it, personally. I know that a new Secretary of Defense, who's excellent, Pete, made a statement today saying that he thinks it's unlikely or impractical. I think probably that's true. I think long before President Putin, they said there's no way they'd allow that. This has been going on for many, many years. They've been saying that for a long time, that Ukraine cannot go into NATO. And I'm okay with that. I just want the war, whether they are or they're not. But it certainly would seem to be that most people have said that that is something that's not going to happen.
This has led to accusations that Trump is prioritizing his relationship with Putin over the interests of Ukraine and its allies. European leaders, particularly Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer, have expressed deep concern over the implications of Trump's rhetoric. Macron has reportedly called for a united European response to counter what he sees as a dangerous shift in U.S. foreign policy under Trump. However, Trump's defenders argue that his approach is pragmatic. They claim that by engaging directly with Putin, Trump is cutting through the diplomatic gridlock and taking bold steps to end the war. Trump himself has repeatedly stated that the war would never have started if he were president, positioning himself as the only leader capable of resolving the conflict.
The cities and towns have been largely demolished. It's a shame what's happened to that country. It would have never happened if I were president, that I can tell you. Would have never happened.
However, European leaders remain unconvinced. They argue that Trump's willingness to entertain Russian demands, such as territorial concessions, could set a dangerous precedent. If Ukraine is forced to cede land to Russia, it could embolden other authoritarian regimes to pursue similar strategies, threatening global stability. The stakes couldn't be higher. Trump's gamble has the potential to either end the war or fracture the West's united front against Russian aggression. As European leaders scramble to respond, the world is left wondering, is Trump's strategy a masterstroke of diplomacy or a catastrophic miscalculation that could reshape the global order? Europe's turning point, a fractured alliance? The recent emergency summit in Paris has revealed a stark reality. Europe is at a crossroads, and its alliance with the United States is under unprecedented strain. European leaders, once confident in their partnership with the U.S., are now grappling with the consequences of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to the Ukraine war. The message from the summit was clear. Europe must step up its defense capabilities and assert its role in global security, or risk being sidelined entirely.
It has to happen now in a very massive way. I'm talking about decisions, about financing, logistics, political decisions when it comes to the defensive capabilities of the European Union and the European countries.
The frustration among European leaders is palpable. At last week's Munich Security Conference, a French senator revealed the blunt message delivered by Trump's special envoy: Europe has no place at the negotiating table.
This senator and vice president of the French Defence Committee was left in no uncertain terms as to how the US views future European involvement.
You have no place. There was actually a lunch called Ukrainian lunch I attended, and the special envoy by Donald Trump was extremely clear. The question was put to him, will the EU be part of the negotiations? And he said no. You don't have
as stark as that.
Oh, it was incredible. That's why I think, we actually, it's the new style. What we're getting from the boss, the Europeans do not have a place at the table.
This exclusion has left European leaders scrambling to remain relevant. The summit in Paris was hastily organized to send a united message to the world, but cracks in the alliance are becoming harder to ignore. The suspicion is that any peacekeeping mission in Ukraine would rely heavily on UK troops that, according to former military leaders, the UK simply doesn't have enough of.
An increase in this country to more like 3 to 3.5% over the next 5 years or so. And that money's got to be spent wisely and sensibly. And certainly, if the Prime Minister is thinking of committing a British ground force to a peacekeeping operation in Ukraine, we're going to significantly have to increase defence spending and do it pretty quickly.
The broader implications of Trump's approach are even more alarming. European leaders are questioning whether NATO itself can survive this moment of crisis. If Russian tanks were to roll into Estonia tomorrow, would Trump stand shoulder to shoulder with Europe? Many fear the answer is no. The summit also highlighted the growing realization that Europe can no longer rely on the US to lead. Trump's vision of the world, as described by European diplomats, is unlike anything they've seen from a US president since NATO's formation in 1949. His willingness to negotiate with Russia without consulting European allies has left leaders like Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer scrambling to assert their relevance.
And it is quite clear that if certain things are needed to secure a peace deal, if ever there is a good peace deal on the table, of course Germany and all the other EU member states will play their part, but the US also has to play theirs.
The challenges ahead are daunting. Europe must not only increase its defense spending, but also address the logistical and political hurdles of building a stronger military alliance. The urgency of the moment is clear, but the solutions remain elusive. The emergency summit in Paris has laid bare the deep divisions threatening the Western alliance. As Europe grapples with the fallout of Donald Trump's unilateral diplomacy, the stakes couldn't be higher. The continent faces a critical choice: rise to the challenge by investing in its own defense and asserting its role in global security, or risk being sidelined in decisions that will shape the future of Ukraine and the world. Trump's approach has left European leaders questioning not only his commitment to NATO, but also the very foundation of their partnership with the United States. The exclusion of Europe from key negotiations with Russia is more than a diplomatic snub. It's a warning that the old rules of global cooperation are being rewritten. But this moment of crisis could also be a turning point. If Europe can unite, increase its defense capabilities, and demand a seat at the table, it has the potential to emerge stronger and more self-reliant. The question is whether European leaders can overcome their internal divisions and act decisively before it's too late. The world is watching, and the decisions made in the coming months will determine whether the West remains a united front or fractures under the weight of its own disagreements. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage of global politics and breaking news. Your support helps us bring you the stories that matter most.